never fail.
At Vesemir's funeral, our heroes are broken. They've lost hard, and the game wants us to sit with that loss and understand how it's affected them, especially Geralt and Ciri. I think one thing I especially love about this is it's not all pain. Depending on your choices, which will have a great effect on the ending, there is healing here, as Geralt and Ciri take a moment to remind themselves that no matter what, they still have each other. I mean, look at the lad's smile, just look at it. And again, it's a chance to see Geralt step into the role of father figure, something that will form a lot of the game's final act. After that little bit of reconciliation and healing, it's time for a wee chapter I call
Motherfucking consequences.
2020 was a shite year, and it certainly made this series difficult to keep going in numerous ways. But it's fitting that I come back with an episode all about loose ends. Ciri decides that going on the offensive is the best way to protect themselves and hatches a plan to hunt down Imlerith, the brutal general of the Wild Hunt and the one directly responsible for Vesemir's death. With a little persuading, Geralt is on board, and so begins something of a victory lap, returning through the world with Ciri to wrap up each area's plot lines. But each of these little wrap-ups isn't housekeeping, they're significant rebalances of power. First in the list are the Crones of Crookbag Bog, who are hosting a feast and celebration where young men and women are chosen to go up the mountain to meet the ladies before returning with special acorns. It's hard to tell whether the folk here genuinely believe that the Crones do no harm, ask nothing in return, and do what little they do out of kindness, or if it's just a lie that they have to cling to out of sheer desperation. That perhaps admitting the sacrifices they're complicit in would be too much. Ciri, having rescued a child sent on the trail of treats, buys none of it, and has no patience for the story they're telling themselves. After, Geralt and Ciri split up, disagreeing about who should tackle Imlerith. After a quick game of rock, paper, scissors, Ciri is tasked with killing the witches while Geralt goes to the mountaintop to confront the general of the Wild Hunt. Below, Ciri discovers what we've long suspected. Those sent to the Crones are killed, fed on by the witches to sustain their eternal youth and power. Ciri makes short work of them, though one does escape, a detail that'll only matter in one of the game's possible endings. Meanwhile, Geralt comes face to face with Imlerith and manages to get revenge. Geralt doesn't revel in it, and despite the brutality it takes to come out on top, there's a matter of factness to how the Witcher manages Imlerith. Killing him seems little different from any of the numerous monsters he's had to slay, if only far more cathartic. Victorious, Geralt and Ciri take a moment to sit and rest. Their relationship here is largely defined by the trust and respect between them. Geralt believed Ciri capable and vice versa, though the player can in dialogue bolster or undermine that sentiment. Back down the mountain, the locals of Velen are informed of the Crones' deaths. They mourn, less for the ladies and more for the magical acorns they'll no longer be receiving to bolster their harvests. Ciri assures them they'll have to manage on their own now. We don't get to see whether the people of Velen prosper without the Crones' guidance. The truth of how much misery was caused by the Crones is left in the air. All that we're left to consider is whether the cost, sacrificing young lives to those in power, could ever be worth it. Geralt and Ciri agree, definitively, that the answer is no. Next they head to Novigrad in their world tour, reuniting with Dandelion and Zoltan, with all sorts of business to wrap up. For this episode, we're only concerned with the plot to assassinate Radovid, an optional quest from early in the game which at long last reaches its culmination. Geralt remains a somewhat reluctant partner in the assassination plot, becoming involved again almost by accident, thanks to his search for Philippa Eilhart, a sorceress of the Lodge who he needs to challenge the Wild Hunt. But once again he's offered an integral role to play, lure Radovid off his boat with the promise of Philippa, and lead him into an ambush. Radovid doesn't trust Geralt, of course, but revenge clouds his judgment and he still ends up caught in the trap. His execution comes not at the hands of the plotters though, but at Philippa's, who is less of the a dish best served cold kind of revenge and more the eye for an eye kind.
That settles the score. And that was from the heart. Forgive me. I could not deny myself the pleasure.
Afterwards, the plotters decide the fate of Temeria, a question which has hung over all the game's events since the beginning. Under their plan, Temeria will remain intact with its own ruler, but ultimately answering to the Empire of Nilfgaard. Not one for compromises, Dijkstra proposes an alternative. He'll step in to fill Radovid's shoes and lead a united Northern Realms to victory against the Empire. It puts him at odds with his co-conspirators, and the player can choose to either let Dijkstra kill them and enact his plan, or stand in his way. Dijkstra's plan is appealing in many ways. You could even find something to be admired in Dijkstra, a man who has been able to outplay two of the most powerful men in the world without the use of any army, and who clearly has sympathies for the downtrodden that Radovid and Emir lack.
Actually, you, Roach, should be the first to understand I've no choice.
Why the hell would I understand?
Because you too are a patriot.
Dijkstra's whole plan, however, hinges on his belief that Geralt is disinterested in politics, that it's none of his business, that the Witcher is apolitical. As a Witcher, Geralt often stands apart from society, drifting from kingdom to kingdom as a nomad. As a player, we can choose to walk away, but who would leave Roche, Vess and Talar to die? Who would allow Dijkstra to fill the void left by Radovid? There are no perfect outcomes in The Witcher 3, and as we near the game's end, it's apparent that no matter how things play out, they can never be the same. What is also made clear, though, is the harm that awaits in the short term. The suffering of marginalised groups under Radovid's reign, and now here, the death of friends at the hands of Dijkstra. It's not a choice a lot of people agonised over, I'm sure. Most would act on their friendship and loyalty, standing with them and killing Dijkstra. But this choice pushes Geralt's often stated neutrality to its limit. To walk away, to adhere to its none of my business, is to do so fully in the knowledge of the immediate deaths that will follow. That doesn't seem a very Geralt thing to do. Earlier, when seeking revenge on Unlerith, Geralt and Ciri don't even debate also taking on the Crones as well. It's a given. They're evil, tyrannical, and must be stopped. And all throughout this journey, the very thing that defines Geralt as a hero is getting involved in other people's problems, to help those who have nobody else to turn to. By making Radovid and the plotter's fates a series of choices, we're invited to think more deeply about the world's politics. Radovid is no conventional monster, but he's killed far more than any troll or griffin you've had to face. Dijkstra too aspires to have a lot of blood in his hands. These are simple choices for most players, but by making us question them at all, we're forced to think critically, if only for a moment, about the politics of this world. And we, like Geralt, must accept we are part of this world one way or another, and cannot choose to be apart. Because even where we might escape consequence, the people we care about do not. While The Witcher acknowledges the importance of grief, of giving yourself time to process, it doesn't patronise with a message about letting go of the harm done. Instead, it wants it to galvanise us, to motivate us. The characters who have spent most of the game on the run or downtrodden are finally given a chance to set things right, and they take it. Sure, revenge can be emotional and petty, but it's impossible to uncouple from the fact that this retribution is against the powerful. Removing them isn't just about helping yourself. It's not perfect, it's not clean, but it's a step forward. Because hey, just because you want to depict the realities of a dystopian and repressive world, doesn't mean you have to let it go unchallenged. It's possible to tell stories about fighting back and redistributing that, letting the world move forward in positive, though nuanced ways. Imagine that.